You're starting to see, like I talked about, the pain's finally kicking in, right? They're starting to realize, hey, look, my numbers are down. People are starting to freak out. It's getting to the slower seasons, technically. And so what's happening is the herd is thinning out. So obviously there's got to be some adjustments. And the big thing that we talked about last week the most is that if you don't change, things aren't going to change.
Hey, this is Blake Sloan. I've been selling real estate over 14 years. Our team of highly trained professionals, along with our unmatched marketing, has sold thousands of homes here in the Myrtle Beach area, and this is how we do it.
And so it's going to get a little worse where it gets better, but that's okay because the ones that survive and get through and dominate, I think we're going to dominate, not just survive it, because we have a plan in place. Like I mentioned, we have a huge amount of people that are in that 24 deals or more here, which is kind of like the minimum you want to kind of be at to even stay here at 24 deals, right? So that's because of the way the team's built, the way the systems are built, and obviously the culture of winning that we have, I think is one of our biggest things. But looking at the thing that I heard, what's happened is, this is a great analogy I got from a buddy of mine was here, is that for the last 10 years, what most agents and everybody has been doing is they've just been walking here and they've been picking up gold off the ground. Walking through every single day, coming in, picking up gold off the ground. That means like gold in terms of like gold nuggets, which should also be looked at as what? Deals, right? Buyers are easy to buy, sellers are easy to sell. They had a lot more equity than they thought they did. Rates are super low, so it creates a frenzy, which makes things a lot easier, which is what everyone has been used to for a very, very, very long time. And now what's happening is, since that rates have gone up, they've gone up significantly, right, from 2.5% to 8%. That's significant difference there, and it creates a lot of buyer hesitation and a lot of buyers who may be a little more difficult to convert. The deep down thing, they still have the same problems though they had before, which is what? A need to move. Divorce, relationship issues, place too small, family grows, job move, whatever it is. There's still going to be the same life reasons that happened before. The difference is to be a little more difficult to get to. And one of the best analogies I got from this I want you guys to think about is just now the difference here is the gold is a little bit deeper. And so what does that mean, you think? You got to dig a little bit deeper, right? You're just going to have to dig a little bit deeper to find the gold. Now, the problem is, what we talked about, is that most agents say they're going to dig a lot deeper. They say, you know what, Blake, I'm going to dig a lot deeper. I know I need to dig a lot deeper. What's the problem going to be? They don't, and they're not going to. Most agents in the marketplace are not going to change. They're not going to act different. They're not going to make sure they do things different. What many of you are going to do, what many agents do, is they dig a little bit, and guess what they do? They stop and do what? They go dig somewhere else. And they dig a little bit, and they stop and move somewhere else and dig a little bit. What happens is they never actually dig deep enough to get to the gold that's in the marketplace right now. And what I mean by that, and what the difference is, it's got to be much more deeper in terms of our conversion and our relationships here. Meaning that we're going to have to be much better in our conversion. We just had an example here this morning. We texted a guy 8 times in a row. Most agents stop at what? 1 or 2 calls. 1 or 2 messages. You've got to go deeper. Why? Because there's just that much more of a difference here. But the main thing I took about this, we talked about a lot last week, is that most agents will say they're going to dig deeper, but no one actually does it. And what happens is they move along to the next hole they're trying to dig, which is surface level, easy. And what they don't realize is when they do that, guess what happens? Somebody comes behind them who's much better, who has a better skill set, who has a better conversion skill set. They come in and do what? Dig a little bit deeper, and they scoop up that little that you just left because you didn't go deep enough. And what I mean by deep enough is not necessarily deep in conversation. What I mean is the amount of reps, your ability to convert. What's happening really, we're seeing that's not working the most is really the scripts and the tonality behind the scripts right now to make sure you're adjusting. Why? There's more objections. It's more difficult, right? Sellers are more difficult. You're going to get more people. There's a contraction in the marketplace. You have people taking 4.5% listings, 4% listings. On the buyer side, you have more hesitation than buyers, more competition. So guess what you have to do? You got to get better, right? You got to get better. One thing I noticed, just if you're seeing this, and I really kind of looked at, hey, how are we getting beat in some of these transactions, and how are we losing to people? And the difference is they change. And I'll talk about this in a minute. Is that you got to change to have change. And what that means is there's a lot of just newer agents who are in the business who are doing pretty decent. If you look at the numbers up, guess what? They're just more hungry. They get in the car, they don't listen to music, they listen to podcasts. They're obsessed. They're obsessed with reading books. They're obsessed with listening to podcasts. They're obsessed to making sure they can win because it's all they have. And most of the time, that's all they know. And so the challenge with us with having such a winning team is people tend to get used to that, and it becomes comfortable. And what they end up not wanting to do is what? Change. They don't make the adjustments in the marketplace until it's too late. And it comes down to really a couple of different things. It's going to be ultimately skill set and belief. I was just talking about this too, and I got this. And the one thing I just want you guys to go through is talk about, like, how do I make sure I have this tenacity the next quarter, this last, couple months of the year, that I got to make sure I'm obsessed with going deeper. Meaning what? More touches, right? Our follow-up calls, before you get away with not making as many follow-up calls. Why? Because there was a frenzy, both the buyer side and the seller side. And so what's happening now is you've got to make sure that I've got to find a way to create more leverage on myself to get more touches to my leads. Meaning what? I have to call them more than I used to call them. Why is that? There's more competition, more hesitation. So if there's more hesitation, they need more or less touches? More. Why? Because they need that to push them through what they need to get pushed through to make the right decision. And so that's going to be the ultimate piece here, my touches, my scripts, meaning that I got to have really good scripts in terms of objections. And how do we know that people are not going to change or they're hesitant to change? When you're used to picking up gold for 10 years plus, or how many years you've been in the business, and things have been so easy, all of a sudden it becomes difficult. It just shows you how people are so used to what they do, they don't actually make the change. And we'll talk about that and draw it out in a minute, just kind of go along with some stuff we talked about in Warrior 2. But you got to make sure that you're understanding that you just got to go deeper and have more touches, more conversion. You also have to have the deep relationship. We talked about it before. Everything before was transactional. Now everything is relational. We were talking about something a lot last week that before, I don't know if you remember, we talked about that attention was new currency. Remember people talked about that a lot? Like, if you want to have a currency in the current world, you need attention. Meaning what? They know who you were. They remembered you. That's not necessarily the case in this current market. In the current economy, what do you think the new currency is? The new currency in the new market is trust. And so you're going to have to find a way to make sure that you can make people trust you and like you at the highest level. And I've had this when I was looking at some of our conversion where they're lower than they should be, both on the seller side specifically, but also on the buyer side. I'm like, how do we have the most phenomenal presentation, the most amazing thing that no one else has, tools, processes, track records, celebrity endorsements that we have that no one has, number one real estate team here in Myrtle Beach, number 48 in North America, whatever it is. Like, how do we have all that and we can lose to some idiot who's always sold 6 houses? Multiple times. What do you think it is? Trust, period.
Relationship, yeah.
It's do they like you and do they trust you? And if they don't like you and they don't trust you, they're not doing business with you right now. And so I want you guys to do a self-check in this next quarter of what's happening, of just understanding and having a little more really openness with your people and a little more runway to, so I can't think of the exact word, give them a little more grace, so to speak. Of like, look, people right now don't trust anything. And I want you to actually have a question of like, if I'm going against somebody else and have the absolute number one team in the area, that most badass presentation, the most badass system, that no one else has anything like it, how do I still lose? You've got to do some self-evaluation there and figure out what the difference is. And you got to figure out what can I do differently and make people trust me and make people like me. Because it doesn't matter how good anything you have is. They want to go with somebody who they trust and like right now. And so guess what? Every piece of tonality that comes across on your initial call, guess what it has to scream? Trust. Like I mentioned before, I was very good at this before where I was making my phone calls. If they're an older person, I was always the grandson in Myrtle Beach, it felt like, right? My tonality said, I know you, you know me, we've known each other for years, and I'm your trusted grandson or trusted whoever it is. If they're younger or my age, I had the tonality like we're best buds, we've known each other since high school. You got to understand of like, how am I going about this to make sure that I'm likable and I'm trustworthy in every single thing that I do. That's going to be number one, tonality. Second piece is going to be words. One we're missing a lot, which you're going to have to hammer right now, which we're missing a lot over and over and over. Some of you guys get really good at it for doing it for a while, then you stop doing it, is social proof. That's so important right now. And I was going back through some of the top 6 things that people make decisions by, the book Influence. Social proof is one that we're missing a lot. We have a lot of it with 830 plus 5-star reviews, some videos, the people doing, testimonials. But what are we not doing a lot of times? Sharing it and sending it to them, right? Systematically, which is super, super important in that scenario of that. But you got to make sure you're having that in that scenario. And the last thing you have to have, we talked about over and over and over, is this tenacity, because you're going to have those 8 follow-up texts, 9 follow-up texts before they're going to respond to you. Why? They don't trust you. They don't trust anybody. It's not they don't trust you. They just don't trust anybody right now, which is the problem. So if I know that and I'm dialed into, hey, look, this is what's happening right now, I want to make sure that I know that, look, I am going to craft everything I do in my follow-up to build what? Trust. And I'm going to have the conversation of what? Hey, Mr. and Mrs., seller, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I know it's a crazy world right now. A lot of things going on. There's a lot of realtors out there promising a lot of things. I want you to know one thing is for certain. You can trust me. I have one goal in mind, which is to serve you at the highest level to make sure you guys are taken care of. Our track record speaks for itself. Just went ahead and sent you a link to all the 5-star reviews or whatever you're going to say, right? And I want you to know that you can trust me in this process. And what's that going to do to someone who's not trustworthy in the current marketplace? It's going to eliminate that difference and going to have them do what for you? Trust. So I want you guys to have this theme the rest of this year. In everything you do in your follow-up, it's going to build trust. It's going to build trust. It's going to build trust. Because what's happening is in this contracting market, as things get worse from a business standpoint, not real estate, like businesses are going to have more struggle. Why? Because just economics. Things cost a lot more money. People are going to buy less shit. It is what it is. Right? Average family spending $700-800 a month more for the same exact items they did just a couple years ago. Which makes things tighter, which trickles down to people buy less stuff. So the things they do buy are that much more important with that much more pressure on it, which means they need to have a lot more what? Trust. And trust obviously builds certainty that we talked about here. And so this is a big takeaway I have with that. But you combine that here with this digging gold. There's a lot of hungry agents right now who are out learning you. I see it. I hear it. My friends don't talk about it. They're role-playing every single day. Not one day a week, every other week. They're role-playing every day. Every time they get in the car, all they have on is podcasts. They're reading sales books. They're listening to sales books. They're obsessed with sales classes online. They go through all this stuff. Right? Andy Yelliff, everybody's finding out about him. Everybody's using him. So here's the deal. You have a lot of people you're going up against with the same exact objection. They're saying the same exact words, but guess who they're going with? The other agent many times because they're more certain what they do and they have it down better. And like I was talking about this video the other day, I shared it before in the group, is you don't practice it until you get it good. What do you practice till? Until you can't get it wrong. And so I just want you to take that into mind. Like you've got to make sure you have to change. And you have to change to make sure you can win in a marketplace of change. But not that much, but it's just small increments and small adjustments that make or break the difference. Because you're doing 80-90% of stuff right. But what's happening is you're in a heightened marketplace with more competition, less deals. There's just small increments that are making or breaking the sale, and they're going with somebody else over you because that person is just a little bit better. Okay? That's just something to run into overall with that scenario, which I want you guys to kind of think about overall. Does that make sense there? That's kind of a quick thing we'll talk about. 68 days left, right? 68, 2 months, really in 8 days. So it's once you guys think about that scenario. But here's one thing. When you look back last quarter, what happened? You look back, let's say your entire year, when you're talking from a goal standpoint, right? Our body being balanced in business, our 98 challenges. Why do some people actually do, others don't do the same exact thing with the same exact tools? Like, why do some get it done and some don't? Okay, it could be anything. What else is it? Right? I want you guys write it down. What do you think it is? I don't know. There's no right answer to it exactly.
I don't look at it enough.
Don't look at it enough. So write your down. Stop tracking it. I want you to write down your own. Like, why does something? Everybody has this at a certain level. Even if you did a good quarter last quarter, you could have done a lot better. We all could have, right? And so why do you look back and why do some people actually do and others do not do it with the same exact tools? They tell me, hey, look, I'm going to make a lot more money. Blake, I'm going to sell a lot more deals this quarter. I'm going to get my body in check. I'm going to do all these things. And what happens at the end of the quarter is, guess what? And so what happens is your mind plays the same book over and over and over and over, and they're not changing their thoughts because you're not changing how you're talking, how you're operating, all the things you're doing. And so that's why it goes back to the same old crevice and the same old really river you've been running in, and you can't go back and actually make change. But it's one of the big things that we just talked about a lot with Warrior. And so one of the things you look at is that people think that they have some type of mental breakthrough, there's going to be a shift. There's never actually a shift until things actually change. And the only thing that matters, if you look back on last quarter, is your fruit. Which is what? Your results, right? Money's one of those. That scenario. And the only thing that matters in that scenario, did I get my win? Yes or no? And if you look at why most people don't, in all 4 areas of life, it comes down to really one main thing. That could be it, in a way. Right? But I'll tell you the one main difference here is the ability, or I'll use, I think I have it, comes down to lack of discipline. People don't hit their goals. They don't hit their targets because of a lack of discipline when it comes down to the boring. What do you think that means right there? Over and over and over. Right? It's very simple. I was talking about on the coaching thing yesterday, 5 months ago. He went to do a fitness competition. He committed to a fitness competition, had a discussion with his wife as far as quarterly goals. Next morning he woke up, he hired his fitness coach for the workouts, hired his nutrition coach, and signed up for the fitness competition next morning. Right? And so in 5 months, gained 9 pounds of muscle, got super, super lean, dude's looking ripped and jacked. But many people have been in Warrior, they're still overweight for years, haven't made a change. Dude did it in 5 months for like an actual on-stage fitness competition, look jacked. Why do some people do the same for years and years and years and actually change? It comes down to, right, the ability to commit and stay with the boring. The example he gave was that he had to change his whole schedule, be at the gym every morning at 5 a.m., right, with multiple kids, multiple business, and he has to control what goes in his mouth. But a lot of people can't do that, specifically in real estate. They cannot deal and master, and I like the words here, is that it always comes down to a lack of discipline in the boring. Right? You control what goes in your mouth, you control what you do, right? But all of a sudden you got to realize is that no one can show up and do the work for you in that scenario. And so when you break it down into quarterly, for my body, my being, my balance, and my business, what happens to most people is they do what? Somebody said it a minute ago. They don't do the monotonous. They get boring in that scenario. And so one of the things that you have is people don't understand that a lot of times all it takes is you got to have the ability to do the simple stuff like what? Make the phone calls, right? Make your dials, block your time out, show up to the huddles, listen to podcasts, listen to sales stuff, block out time to make sure I'm listening, reading books, all that stuff that you got to do when? Over and 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 over. And the problem with it is simple, like selling real estate, being really good at real estate is not that complicated. It's pretty simple. We talked about the number one killer in real estate is freedom. And so you know you need to show up to the huddle, but what happens? You don't do it. You know you need to get up a certain time, but you don't do it. Because you're in business for yourself in a way, but you're in business together with us, but that freedom there ends up knocking that out. And so the problem is that the simple stuff is boring. And the boring stuff is simple. And it creates this loop here that over and over and over, you know what you need to do, you get excited about it, you have this breakthrough in your mind, you commit to it, then all of a sudden you start doing it, all of a sudden you have this story in your head that what? It's boring. And I want you guys to understand, and this one quote we got from Warriors, that empires are built on the boring. Bill talks about this a lot, is that empires are built on the simple. Right? And so the simple and boring stuff is what builds your empires over and over and over. And it always is able to be connected easily with the facts. The easiest stuff to track are usually the most boring, which is what? Dials, answers, appointments booked, appointments held, client signed. Right? And so I want you guys to understand that if you want to make sure you find a way to win the next 68 days in a marketplace of contraction, you're going to have to make sure that you're committed and you're dialed into mastering what? The simple. Even if it feels boring. Why? Because that's how the empires are built in any type of business. It's the ability to make sure you can master those simple things overall. What do I think our biggest weakness is, though? Right now, our biggest weakness as a team and organization is conversion. So, like we know what to do for the most part. 70-80% of the time we know what to do. We have good scripts. I think we're better on the phones than anybody else. We're better on the scripts than most people. What's happening though, you're competing against a marketplace where a lot of people are going with friends, and you got to be that much better for them to want to go with you versus their friend. And so that needs you guys to get much better. And also there's a lot of hesitation, right? So I need you to make sure you're very, very good right now at studying your conversion piece. What would that mean? That's my face-to-face. That's my phone follow-up. And that's really kind of the extra mile of what I need to do. But I was studying a lot for this week. That really stood out to me about where we're missing stuff the most. Why? Because I see people, they'll be super good for a week or two, then what happens? They fall off. Super good for a week or two, and they fall off. Their dials are great for a week or two, and they fall off. Because what happens is they don't have the ability and the mindset to make sure they can stick through something the right way for a very, very long time. They want to have something that's new and that's exciting, but that's not where businesses are built, unfortunately. Right? In any business, doesn't matter what type of business it is. Guess what? You have a coaching business, you coach people, guess what you do? You get on coaching calls over and over and over and over and over, 10 to 15 coaching calls a day, every day. Which is what? Simple and boring. Right? But guess what that comes with? A lot of money. It's just one of those things that it has to happen. It says the coaching call start at 6 a.m. his time. Which is a lot of boring over and over and over. But guess what? Pretty simple and boring. Guess what he tells them to do on the coaching call? Do they know they need to do, they don't do it. Right? It's the same thing we tell you guys, right? It's very simple. You just say, look, do you know what you need to do? Yeah, why aren't you doing it? Because it's just how humans are understanding it. So my goal as a leader is to help at least you get ahead of this right now and say, look, how do I make sure I can really settle in and quit looking for the finish line? I come in, I settle in, and do what I need to do. Right? The same example with him doing the fitness competition. Right? Every morning, 5 a.m., not sexy. Eating certain meals. Having over and over and over and over the same exact thing. Chicken and rice, fish and rice. Right? For 5 months straight. But guess what you do? You got to do that to get the results. Anybody that's very, very fit, anybody been around somebody that's super fit, what do they eat all the time? Chicken and rice and fish. That's it. And veggies. Over and over and over and over and over. Why? Because that's what you got to do in any type of thing to get results. And so the most elite people are able to do that. It doesn't mean your life has to be boring, but just the work part, you just settle in, get it done, and get out. I don't spend all day doing it, but I make sure I do it what? Every single day, consistently. There's a difference there. You don't got to do it all day, but you can do it a little bit every single day and make sure you have that consistency there to make sure I'm able to hit it. And that's one of the, I think the superpowers I have is I can eat the same every day if I have to. I don't care. I just settle in. I do the same things over and over and over and over and over. I don't like change. And it's very, very good from a superpower standpoint. Some people it drives them crazy. But it's important to understand, like, look, this is what makes a difference. If I'm in town, not somewhere, I'm at every single huddle, unless it's a Tuesday. I missed one huddle, I think, the last few months is because I had a closing that morning. It's the only time they get the closing. And it was my closing I was buying, so I had to be there, right? So it's one of those things that makes a big difference, right? You've got to make sure that you're selling in right now, going forward with this, in that scenario. Questions about that? Now, to do that, and if I have this scenario where I don't have the patience to do this, and this is something Moses talks about a lot, I want you to understand, if I don't like this and I hate this, guess what? That's okay. Because the ability to settle in and come through this is a skill. What most of you don't realize is that what you have there is you have the ability to learn through a skill. What's the best way to acquire patience? Does anybody know? Excited to have a kid? Seriously, what else? You have to do things that require patience.
Just a lot of reps, really.
Reps after reps after reps after reps of things that require patience. And so what you do is you settle in and you build that muscle to make sure you understand, hey, look, this is okay, and this is what has to be done. But it's important that you make sure you do that, because until you have the ability to look in the mirror, and I have this written in my notes somewhere, is that you have to make sure you're able to look in the mirror and ask yourself, hey, look, am I going to be able to look in the mirror and know I'm willing to do whatever is required to win? Now, have you considered that this quarter, in this marketplace, this is going to be more important than ever? My consistency, my follow-up, my dials, my tonality, my learning. And I think what I mean by learning is you're going to have to build this in every single day. There's people who are doing very good before who aren't doing as good right now in the market change. And guess what's happened? The market's outgrown them. The difficulties, the scripts, the process, tonality, people don't trust them like they used to. And so what's happening is they got to make the adjustments and build that version themselves, aka skill up to make sure they can match the marketplace right now. And so you need to be obsessed with learning more than you ever learned, with just consuming every single thing. Like I mentioned, I've gone back lately to a lot of the old stuff I used to do when I was in that thing back in the day. It's been super powerful for me. It's like reignited this parts of me that I forgot was even there. And I was listening to him like, man, I've heard this before, and I could even tell what he's going to talk about next, and just reignite this piece of me of understanding, hey, look, the mindset's really important. And one of the things that we talked about, they talk about so much, is the power of the tongue. That everything that you have in your life lives and dies by the word that you say. Powerful, right? In terms of positive, or negative in terms of obviously you're going to bring more negativity to your life. And I think that's super important right now in today's marketplace. Faith and doubt, you have two voices in your head. Your destiny is determined by which one you listen to the most.